In this lecture, we are now ready to set up things for allowing the user to actually log into the system. So the very first thing that we want to do is come inside of our test editor, and then we want to go inside of our config folder, app.php. So right here, because the Legato framework offers support for authentication out of the box, we just need to ensure that we are providing the right data here. So it can also help us to check if the user has already activated their account. So if you are using a version of Legato framework that is less than 1.1.2, then you actually need to ensure that you have this file. You can just create this file called app.php inside of config and then just update it like this. So if you're not sure, can always go and check the documentation. There will be upgrade from 1.1.1 to 1.2, and then you can scroll down to this section. So this is the authentication and encryption support. So in order to take advantage of this support, you need to ensure that you have app.php inside of config file and then have all of this data there. So what we can do here is to specify the feeds that we want to use to allow the users to authenticate. So in our system, we allow the user to either use their username or their email address. So if in your own database, this is name, you just change this to name. If you only allow for name, just remove this. Okay, so depending on the flexibility, the framework will support you to actually use 2 feeds. So you can specify 1 or 2 feeds, but it must always be inside of an array. So your array can be, I want to allow the user to log in with their username, okay, or their email. So this is exactly what is being set here as the default. And then if you are not using the users model, which is provided out of the box from the framework, you need to specify the provider for your users table. So whatever model that you are using to store your users information, you need to actually specify the fully qualified part here so that it will now use that model to authenticate your users. Otherwise, it's going to assume that you are using the default users model, which is what we are using currently so far in the course. So we're going to leave that like that. And then here we need to also tell it that our authentication actually requires activation. So if this is an empty array, it assumes that your authentication does not require the user to activate their account. So if we want to say that we require the user to activate their account, we actually need to specify the column that it should check. So we're going to say activated is the name of the column, and the value that shows that the user is activated should be 1. So this is the way that we have set up our system. If we come back here, go to database, you can see that activated is the name of the column, and the value that shows that the user has activated their account is 1. So whatever you name your column that you're using for your activation, just specify it there. So specify it here in the array, and whatever value you are using, you're using true or you're using a string, just specify the value here, and then the framework will take care of the rest for you. So after doing this, ensuring that everything is set up properly here, we have specified the right columns. We are now going to come inside of the auth controller. So we can now close this, and then we now need to work on the login. So we need to inject requests. So that will be legato request, and then we can grab some things from the sign up, at least up until the point of the validation. So we want to still do our validation. So we just grab that, then paste them here. And then now we want to remove those things that we don't need to validate. So this is going to be pretty simple. We just need to check to ensure that the user is actually providing the data. So it should be username, password is also required, and then the reCAPTCHA is also required. So these are the 3 things that we need. We validate that. We also validate our reCAPTCHA. We don't need to rewrite this code again because we wrote it during the registration. So we're going to leave all of this, except that now we want to show this in the login. page. Okay, so far all this is good. So once we pass through this phase, it means that there is no validation error. We are now going to attempt to authenticate the user. So to do that, we are going to use the Legato authentication method. We only just need to pass it the credentials and also to specify if we want to remember the user. Remember that we have the remember me functionality. So we're going to say credentials should be equal to an array. So we're going to say the username. Okay, so it will look for this feed username inside of the credential array. So that will be equals to request input username. And then it will also look for password. So do ensure that you actually specify this like this. So the keys that you use here should be username and the key that you use here should be password, even if your form is different. So here you can reference your form data, but when you're passing it to the credentials, ensure that this is username and this is password. So I'm going to just grab this and then put it here, change this to password. So after we store that inside of this array called credentials, we can now create a variable here called authenticate and then set this to be equal to get. So that will be Legato Framework security get authenticate. So here we pass in credentials, it's the first argument, and then the second argument will be if we want to remember the user. And then here we can say remember. So this should be equal to true or false. The default will be false. So let's say if the user does not check the remember me box, then you can just actually remove this, set it to false. Otherwise, now we are going to do a check to see. So let's just say request input remember. So if the user checked on the remember me box, the value is going to be equal to on. And then we can set our variable called remember to be equal to true. Otherwise, the variable remember should be equal to false. So this is all we need to do to authenticate the user. So once we make this call to get authenticate, it is going to actually return us true if the authentication succeeded. So we're going to say if authenticated or authenticate is not equal to true. If this is not equal to true, it means that something failed. Maybe the user has not activated their account or the credentials are not correct. So we're going to say return view. The view will be auth/login, then pass in error. Then the error should be equal to whatever is being returned from the authenticate get authenticate method call. So this is going to happen if something goes wrong here. Maybe the password is not correct, the user was not found, or the account has not been activated. So we're going to try all of the use cases. Otherwise, we're just going to die and dump user. So once authentication succeeds, it means that we can now retrieve the user using this user global function. So using this function, we can just retrieve the details of the user. So let's quickly give this a try on the browser. So to come here and then come to the login page, I'm going to use the username, which is Tedium, then use a wrong password. It says the credentials do not match our record. So let's test the other use case when the user account is not yet activated. So this time I'm going to provide the right information. I'm going to use the email. Click on submit. It says account not activated. And then finally, we are now going to pass in the correct data and then see what happens. See, we now get the user's data. So you can just see that with few lines of code, we are able to perform user authentication and get back the valid user's data. So to finish up this, we want to quickly create one view. So let's get back again to inside of views. So we want to create a new folder here, call this links, and then this should now be index.link.php, or rather blade.php. So we're just going to quickly borrow some things from here. So let's borrow some things from activation. That will be auth activation. Borrow this and then come here to link index. So this is the page that we want to show when the user logs in successfully. We want to redirect the user to this page. Okay, so let's just set the title to share a link, and then for now we're still going to leave errors and sources here. But basically right now we just want to do something very basic, like just display the name of the user here. So let's come here and say username. So this is just going to be a temporary placeholder. We're going to update all of this here later. So we can now say username. So if we want to add more things, so we can put a break tag here. And they say maybe we want to show the avatar. So let's say avatar. So as I said, this is just going to be temporary. So let's grab this. For avatar, we want to use the image tag. So let's say we break that to a new line. Then say img src slash. So this will now be avatar. It will be auth. So for users that don't have avatar, so this is just going to be a broken image. So later we're going to actually fix that by providing a default avatar picture. So let's try this and see if everything works as intended. Let's come here and then just say return view links slash index. So if the login is successful, we just want to return link slash index. Come back here. So let's try to log in again. Check this. So now we can also click on remember me to just see if this actually works. So let's click on submit, and here we actually get the name of the user, but we don't get the avatar. Okay, so we can actually inspect and see what's being returned there. Okay, so we have double slash here. So can actually go back and inside of link index, let's remove this because we are already using the absolute part. So that will be the first thing that we want to check. Okay, so later we're going to actually fix this. We should not return that view. We should actually just redirect to another page. So we're going to fix all of this later. For now, we just want to display the data. So we still have a few things to fix. Let's log in. Okay, so we get the avatar here. Let's now also see if our remember token is being set. So let's inspect elements, then come under applications, cookies, then check for the cookie under our site. So we can see remember token. So this is actually set here and the value is actually here. So the remember token that is being used here is actually encrypted and is very secured. So it's going to be remembered by default for 14 days, I think. So that will be remember for about 14 days. All right, so that will be all for this lesson. In the next lecture, we are now going to see how we can actually create a middleware to redirect the users when they are already logged in. So when the user is already logged in, we don't want to show all of these menus here, and we also don't want them to be able to view the login page. So we are going to achieve that using a middleware. All right, I'll see you in the next lecture.